Hey guys, this is Coop and we're in my video analysis room, and I was thinking it'd be really cool if we took a look at a couple athletes from last year's combine and break down their sprinting mechanics. What's really cool is one of these athletes got drafted in the fourth round and ran a really good 40 time. The other one ran a little bit slower and didn't get drafted. And you can really see the differences in mechanics and how big that played into, how well they did. So let's take a look at that.
All right, first athlete we're going to take a look at here is Hasty. Hasty's a running back. He ends up running a 4.58, which is not a bad time. All right, the reason I chose Hasty is he actually did really well in some of the testing. He was very explosive, great vertical jump, just I think 39.5 inches. Great broad jump, over 10 feet with the broad jump, but didn't really correlate to his 40. Took a look at his mechanics and just technically really quite a few mistakes, and just wanted to take the time to point some of those out. I really think if he could have corrected some of these issues, he would have easily been in the 4.4s, which is taking a tenth off of his time, which is pretty significant. Even maybe a little bit lower, maybe even into the low 4.4s. So let's look just at his setup position here to start with. All right, I want you to notice just the back leg. Notice how that back leg is completely straight. Last few years at the combine, if you watch the combine, you'll notice that guys have been straightening their back legs a lot more than they used to. The concept behind that is to get mechanical efficiency. A straighter leg, a more extended leg, is stronger than a bent leg. All right, but what you start to give up there is some range of motion. So I will do this with some athletes. I won't lock out their back leg, but definitely might have a little bit of a straighter back leg if I'm trying to get some mechanical efficiency, because the athlete maybe lacks strength to power ratios. But as we watch this athlete go forward, we'll really notice that he doesn't get any push with that back leg. He's basically stepping out of that position. Another thing to kind of mention here is also just the head position. He's got his head up a little bit. Also, besides just stepping out, that's going to cause him to lever himself up and be a little bit tall. We want athletes coming out at 45 to 55 degree angles. He's definitely above that angle here, even though we don't have the position to really put an angle to find out exactly where he is. I can definitely tell you he's high. Next thing we're looking at here is just his first contact. All right, and this is crazy. He's actually contacting at least a foot behind his center of mass. You always want to contact under your hip or behind your hip slightly, but because this athlete didn't get any good push out of the hole, he's actually compensating, and he's stepping significantly behind his body because he's got to get himself going, because he's not going anywhere yet with just that single step, all right, with that push off of just the left leg. Next up, all right, we can kind of really point out what I was talking about here. If we look at where the front foot is contacting, and then we draw a line through the center of the hip here, all right, we can see that this athlete is placing the ball of his foot 12 inches in front of the center of his hip, which is where the ball of the foot should be contacting. All right, here's the hip, this blue line. That foot should be landing on that line or slightly behind that line. When it does so, he has the ability to push himself forward right away. The name of the game with sprinting fast is putting as much force into the ground in the shortest time possible. All the mechanical stuff is just set up to do that. And this foot should be landing there or even behind there, all right, allowing the athlete to push himself forward right away. And where he's hitting the ground now, it's just causing a delay. Another thing that you'll see here is what we call skater steps, where that foot of that athlete is getting out to the side now. So it's not quite as far out as the last step was, but it starts going to the side. And this is a common compensation. When an athlete starts to overreach with his contacts, right, that doesn't feel natural because he'll feel himself slowing down. He'll feel himself start to stumble. So he'll start to put it to the side like this. So you don't necessarily need to correct an athlete by telling him, hey, don't put your foot to the side, because that's going to cause him to overstride more. What we need to do is get him to place his foot more back, more underneath of the hips. Let's take a look at one more stride, because this really, I think this contact really starts to emphasize it. Here it is, just before it hits the ground, all right? Well out in front of the hip. Here's the center of mass back here. I mean, he's about to land again 12 inches, maybe 18 inches in front of his hip. That foot's skating a little bit, not as bad as the right feet do. But despite all that, bad start, only pushing off of one leg, really overstriding. Here's another skating step. Skating, overreaching his stride. The athlete ends up getting a low 1.610, okay? This guy, fix all those things, at least a 10th right there in the beginning. He's a 1.52 guy, which makes him a 4.4 guy, okay? Going down the line, he hits his 20, 2.75, a little over a 10th between the 10 and the 20. That's not bad. That's kind of where we would expect him to be. Same thing here, right around 1 second, excuse me, not a 10th in that 10 to 20, but a second, a little over a second, a little under a second from the 30. And now let's look at the late end of his top speed here, and let's get a nice flight position. Here we go. So besides his acceleration, which is what everybody kind of tends to focus on a little bit, you know, the start, the mechanics, let's look at his top end speed, because there's always a little bit of time to be gained here. First thing I want to point out is just his overall posture. Overall posture from the ground should be pretty vertical. You want to see this athlete at 90 degrees, all right? If I put this line through his spine, right about there, you can see he's at about 82 degrees. Whereas what we want to see is more like a 90-degree posture. Another important variable to kind of point out here is just his chest. All right, see how much of his numbers you can see? What that tells me is this athlete is rotating excessively. Shouldn't see that much of the number. And the reason that all this is happening, and we're not going to be able to get the best view because he's really moving at a high speed now, is just where he's contacting again. Foot placement is so important. That foot is getting out in front of the body here, all right? When that foot gets out in front of the body, you're going to spend longer times on the ground, causing excessive rotation. All right, second athlete we're going to take a look at is Pride. Pride's a DB. And the reason I chose him is he's a little bit the opposite of the last athlete we were just looking at, in terms of he didn't do as well in the explosive movements. I think his vertical was a 35. His broad, I believe, was under a 10. So not as explosive off of two legs, but he ran really well. Despite that, ran in the 4.4s, and he ran with really good mechanics. And I think that's part of the reason why he ran so well. So let's take a look at that, all right? We can notice a significant difference here just in the setup right now, right? So, you know, we pointed out the back leg being straight on the last athlete, whereas you can see here he's probably got a 100-degree angle or so in that knee joint. It's hard to tell from this angle, but it's definitely far from straight, and it looks like he's in a good position to get good push. The athlete also has his head in line with his spine. His head is down. He's probably going to come out at a good angle. So let's just watch both legs as we fire out, and we see he's getting a good push, right? He's getting some good forward motion. His overall angle coming out significantly lower, down around 45, 55-degree angle, right where he should be. And now let's look at those contacts. Here's his first contact. He has a great first step, all right? There's the ball of the foot hitting under the hip or slightly behind the hip, just like we talked about. Second contact, there it is. This contact, not quite as good as the first contact, and as we'll talk about, that's probably his biggest mistake in this 10, but not too many mistakes at all. And then looking at his third step, again, coming down, hammering the ground directly under his center of mass. I mean, here's the hip, right? There's the contact point, slightly behind the hip. And just like I talked about with the previous athlete, getting that foot to land under the hip, slightly behind the hip, that allows you to put all the force in quicker. And when you can put the force in quicker, that exponentially increases the amount of force you can put into the ground, thus making you run much faster. So if I was to coach this athlete up, this second step, this contact right here, it's a little long. That needs to be tightened up. But besides that, all these other contacts he's doing great on. All right? Seems to just be a little bit better with his right leg than he is with his left leg. He's not skating these steps. If you look where this right foot hits, it's hitting right down the middle of the fairway there. All right, having a great contact. And it ends up paying off. He gets a pretty good split, 155 in the first 10 yards. All right, let's go down the line. Let's take a look at his top end speed. We can already see as he's moving here, he's starting to transition to a nice upright posture as he continues to accelerate with his upright posture. He's got a good leg cycle. So let's go ahead and analyze that position. Let's find a nice leg cycle frame. Here we go. All right, so just like before, let's just take a look at the overall posture from the ground. You know, we talked about we want to be at about a 45-degree angle, a 90-degree angle. And there he is. He's pretty much right on the mark. All right. We want to have a nice high knee position. That also should be at about 90 degrees, doing a great job here. And then also notice the difference here in the numbers. He's not getting that rotation. And again, it's all going to come down to that foot placement. It's hard to get exact landing spot with the Blair and the white ground, but he is hitting further, even though it's only a few inches behind his body, he's hitting the ground slightly further back. But besides that point, this type of posture just sets him up so that this right leg here can attack the ground in front of him. When you don't have that good high knee position, you get more of a casting and just a falling of the ground, impacting the ground with a little bit of deceleration, whereas he's really approaching the ground aggressively, hammering the ground, and explosively propelling himself forward. So let's take a look at these guys side by side. Okay, here we go. We can just take a look. Obviously, we got two significantly different setups here. All right, let's scroll forward first on Hasty over here. And let's look at his initial push and look at his first contact. All right, there's his first step. Right there. Hits the ground. All right, now let's do the same thing over here on Pride. Let's look at his first initial push and where his first step hits the ground. Okay? Now we can see just by that black dash on the ground here, right? Here and here, okay? We can see that Pride is 12 inches in front of Hasty, all right? He got a significantly better push. So, I mean, just that start right there, literally he's got a step, a half a step gain just because of the setup of everything. Let's just take that a look a little bit further. Let's look at the following step. Here he is. Pride's getting way out there in front. Let's look at one more step. And again, you know, we just see the same trend. He hasn't been able to start to catch up it yet at all. You know, if we look at that black dash, we can see how far behind he is. And all because of that initial push. And also continuing just because of the contact. Let's take a look at this fourth contact here. and here, and just start to see the difference between Hasty's so far out in front of his hip. Here's his hip way back here, and looking at Pride's hip and his foot contact, he's just able to continue to push himself forward so much more effectively. Let's look at the top end speed now. Let's get Hasty right around 35. Here's that frame we were looking at before. Now let's get Pride there. Here we go. That's it. All right. He's actually a little bit earlier in the run, as you can see, but just achieving a better posture. So one of the things we talked about just real quick was just being able to see the chest, right? I mean, clearly you can see the athlete on the left's got a lot more rotation than the athlete on the right. He's starting to turn towards us. That's always an indicative of the athlete spending too much time on the ground. Sprinting is off of one leg, causes rotation. When you're on the ground on one leg, your body wants to rotate. The longer you're on the ground, the more it wants to rotate. And so that's just indicative of, hey, this athlete's spending too much time on the ground. And the other big thing we can see here is just the posture, right? If we're looking at Pride's posture to the ground, all right, versus Hasty's posture, all right, I mean, we can clearly just see the difference in the body position. And at the same time, we can also take a look at the thigh height, significantly different thigh height. So not only in acceleration, but also in top end speed, just some mechanical tweaks that could have made all the difference in the world. And, you know, this is really commonplace for the combine, for pro days, right? If Hasty could have ran a 4.4, he probably would have been drafted. He went as an undrafted free agent. Phenomenal athlete. He's playing a little bit this year. Pride, on the other hand, he did get drafted. He got drafted in the 4th round. I'm not saying it's just because of their 40s, but that difference between a 4.5 and a 4.4 can be just a couple of slight tweaks as far as technical ability. And I think it's very evident in these two athletes. That's why it shows these athletes, because Pride, the athlete on the right, who's lacking in explosive power relative to the athlete on the left, all right, mechanically put it together in his sprint. And he gets a 4.4. He gets drafted in the 4th round. Whereas the athlete on the left, in terms of physicality, being explosive, he might be a better athlete, but just he didn't get the technical coaching, or he didn't put the technique together necessary in order to run a good time.
Hey guys, thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. If you want to get some more information, please scroll down, click the link, send us a message, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again.